All right, well, we will begin. Hello and welcome to this week's MetPro Meetup. My name is Tom, and I am really excited today because we've got founder Angelo Poli joining us to talk about wellness for my body type. Now, it's not just going to be about my body type, it's going to be about each one of us. And as Coach Jesse just mentioned in the chat there, hope you know which body type you are. So look forward to the participation here from everybody. Little bit of introduction to get things started. If you're not already familiar with Angelo, Angelo is the founder of MetPro, and MetPro is for metabolic profiling. He devised that process that analyzes someone's metabolism and provides that individualized approach to obtaining goals, whatever those might be. And now, Angelo's had many decades of working with athletes, executives, professionals, ordinary people that aren't athletes or executives, but he remains passionate and dedicated and has built a team that is passionate and dedicated about wellness, about fitness, about nutrition. And so anytime he gets a chance to speak with us, it's always a privilege to get those insights. So with that, Angelo, great to have you. Tell us everything about our body types.
Well, thanks for having me back, Tom. And I do have a good team. They keep me on my toes. They'll let me know if I'm going sideways on anything. So, and I see a lot of their smiling faces here tonight. So thank you all for being here.
Excellent. Excellent. So to kick things off, Angelo, what is a body type? You know, we mentioned you've tossed about some terms before, and Megan has mentioned those. What are the different body types that are out there?
So we'll read about different body types in media, online, or in health fitness or fitness magazines. And so typically they're referred to in two different ways. One is a little more kitschy, a little bit more cliche, and that has to do with your shape. You know, you're the apple shape, or you're the pear shape. That's a little less scientific. A more scientific correlation to our body type is going to be to speak of our body type in terms of ectomorph, mesomorph, or endomorph. And though you can correlate shape to that, what we have is the three basic, what they're called the somotypes. And really, they're expressions of our genetic disposition. So our body type isn't, oh, you were born in this category. Our body type is actually an expression of where you fall on a spectrum of predispositions, and that's mostly determined by your genetics. Now, I say mostly because your body type can change. Now, I know that's a little like, wait a second. No, I didn't read that. Your body type can change, but it tends to be one directional. And what that means is ectomorphs can become mesomorphs, and mesomorphs can become endomorphs, though generally you tend to stay in your own lane throughout your lifetime. Endomorphs can never become ectomorphs. And as we dive into that, I'll explain a little more.
So maybe on that point, Angelo, could you give a thumbnail sketch of what each one of those body types look like, ectomorph, for example?
I can indeed. I can give a thumbnail sketch. So I could literally draw it on a piece of paper and show everyone. But not to be cliche about it, but your ectomorphs are your stick figures, right? The ectomorphs are the ones with longer arms, longer legs, a more petite musculature, generally speaking. The ectomorphs are usually ones that do not carry much body fat in their lower body or extremities, though there are exceptions to that rule. Generally speaking, arms and legs are going to be leaner. And if an ectomorph does put on weight, it's usually in their midsection. Mesomorph is, at least at the high school age, kind of that Goldilocks zone, medium build, you know, not too big, not too small, just a person that has a general medium build. Sometimes someone will look at someone who's a mesomorph and say, you have an athletic build because the dominant quality is having some level of musculature. Mesomorphs tend to gain weight a little bit more evenly throughout their body. But here's the thing, as mesomorphs age, typically they start leaning towards carrying a little bit more body fat. They don't tend to, all things being equal, lose weight. They tend to gain weight. Ectomorphs, sometimes all things being equal, can tend to actually lose mass, not gain mass, especially muscle as they age. Then your endomorphic body types are people who are just naturally stockier, broader, curvier, whatever the case may be. They tend to carry a lot of muscle on them naturally, and genetically they have just a more developed lower body musculature. Those tend to be the hallmarks of an endomorphic body type. And they tend to be very strong people, kind of the survivors of the group, very strong, have a lot of muscle, but they also tend to carry body fat more easily when not kept in check. So that describes the three body types. And a lot of people will say, well, I'm not really sure which one. Now, most people, if they're on either extremes, they go, oh yeah, I'm an ectomorph, or I'm an endomorph. But kind of when they fall somewhere in the middle, it can be a little difficult to know. That's normal. And the reason is because it is absolutely possible to have attributes from all three different body types. Some people do. So that's why you want to think of yourself more as on a spectrum, but there's no absolute definitive you're this or you're that. Because somewhere your parents, your grandparents, you have in your genealogy stockier individuals, more petite individuals. Some people have stockier lower body musculatures and very petite upper body. So a very simple way to define your body type is to ask yourself three questions. So the first question is just, how would I describe myself? Petite, medium, or stocky build? So you can just kind of think of that answer in your head. Petite, medium, or stocky. Then ask yourself, if I do put on weight, where does it tend to go first? Upper body, midsection, evenly throughout my body, or mostly lower body first. And then the third thing you can do, and this is by no means an absolute or scientific test, but it's just something real simple that you can do. If you just take your hand, wrap it around the opposite, your right hand, wrap it around your left wrist. Can you touch? Can you touch fingers? Can you not quite touch? Can you just barely touch? Or can you actually overlap? Now, for a male, if you can't quite touch, that's a pretty good indication that you might be in that endomorphic category. That just has to do with your bone structure. Thicker, bigger bones. If you can just barely touch, maybe slightly overlap or not quite touch, you might be in that mesomorphic category. And if you can easily overlap, while there's no guarantee, everyone can have different characteristics, might put you in that ectomorphic, more petite category. So now what you do is you take those three questions and you go, which answer did I get the most? One end, the other end, or the middle? Did ectomorph come up more often, the first one? Mesomorph right in the middle, or endomorph? And whichever one you came up with the most, at least there's a good indication that that's your genetic leaning. So I'll speak for myself here. I'm about halfway between ectomorph, petite frame, and mesomorph. I'm about halfway between the spectrum. And every year that goes by, surprisingly, somehow I get closer to mesomorph. And guess what? As I get older, that's the way of things. That's how it typically tends to go. When I was a teenager, I had to drink the shakes. I had to eat the extra calorie burritos. And I went and I did anything to try and put on a pound. And it was hard to keep that pound of muscle. Now, I don't have to try so hard. It tends to stay with me a little bit easier. That's the hallmark of how your body type evolves over time. Of course, your metabolism and your lifestyle and your routine and what you've conditioned through nutrition and training your metabolism to do, those all play a role. But hopefully that will help. Does everybody feel like they can at least say which category they're either in this category or between these two categories? Most people confident in that? Yeah. So I see a question here. Somebody put in chat, if we pick the wrong body type in the app, will it hurt progress? And that's the question, right? No, it won't. It won't hurt. It is unlikely that you're an ectomorph and you confuse endomorph and vice versa. The reason is because what's most important when deciding on a strategy for yourself is to look at your body type through the vantage point of your goal. This is where a lot of confusion comes in. Anybody want to share with me what their personal fitness or health goals are? Do we have any brave individuals in the crowd? Usually I just threaten to start pointing to people, but you know. Who's going to share with me? Any goal, nothing too big, too small.
Feel free to hop off mute if anyone would like to share.
Oh yeah, please.
I'll be happy to share, Angelo.
Please.
So my weight loss goals are, I'm 5'6". I weigh 190 pounds. At one point in my life, I weighed 270 pounds. For 2 years, I have worked out 6 hours hard a week, and I mean hard, and could not move the needle. I can't tell you how many people say to me, why aren't you thin? Because I would eat 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day. So I kept telling my husband, I know that there just has to be a tweak. I'm just doing something not quite right, because I've got the nutrition down. I drink the water, I do the exercise, and you know, I would keep cutting back, and that still wasn't working. So my goal is to get to a healthy weight, which at this point for me, I think will be around 140, 150.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Stacy, for sharing. That's fantastic. So this is a perfect example. So your goal, and anybody listening that identifies with that, say, yeah, that sounds like my story. And by the way, congrats on the progress you have made. Well done. Keep going. Your goal is weight loss. So now here's where there's a problem with all the information we read out there, because we read this article that says, oh, by the way, if you're an ectomorph, you need to be lifting weights, you need to be eating high protein, and you need to be doing this, that, and the other thing. And you know what? That's often right. But it always has to be filtered through, well, it depends. It also depends on your goal. Because, by the way, you can be in shape in any of those body types. You have ectomorphs that are in great shape. You have mesomorphs in great shape. You have endomorphs in great shape. By the way, you can have ectomorphs that are thin. You can have ectomorphs that are overweight. You can have mesomorphs thin. You can have mesomorphs overweight. And same thing with endomorphs. So if you know what your goal is, then that's always going to help determine and set the pace for how we would make decisions. So if you're an ectomorph that is also wanting to lose weight, where all the recommendations out there of you need to get protein, that's good, and you need to lift weights, and that's good. I want you to do all of that. But if you're lifting weights so much and eating so much protein that your weight's starting to go up, it's no longer right for you. We have to look at what your goal is and make sure that first and foremost, that goal is in place. And then, of course, how much we reduce, how much we adjust is going to be dependent on at what threshold you start, in your case, losing weight. So I've worked with, I worked with a gal, she was 5'3", and she feigned interest in exercise. She came to the gym and she worked with me 3 days a week, but you know, she was one of those that, you know, didn't really like to get sweaty when she worked out. But she genetically had such a fast metabolism. If she ate less than about 2,800, 3,000 calories a day, I'm not exaggerating. It was literally that high. She would actually lose weight. That is unusual, but they are out there. There's the extreme ends of the spectrum. And she was only 5'3", about 120, 118 pounds. And if she missed a meal, she'd lose weight. So what's the strategy for her? She didn't need to do as much cardio. We needed to get the weight to stick to her body. We needed to do regular type 2 muscle fiber resistance training. She needed to get adequate protein, and she needed to not miss meals. That was the strategy for her. Now, I've worked with the exact opposite. I worked with a guy. He was an absolute sweetheart. We became very, very good friends over the course of some time. He started at 273 pounds. He was about 5'9", about just a little taller than I am. And he was doing an hour a day on his elliptical. He was eating about 1,800 calories a day, which is not a lot of calories for a guy that size. And you know, he was losing maybe half a pound a week. And no, it's not fair. And that's the first thing I teach people when I talk with doctors, when I talk with exercise physiologists, when I talk with medical professionals, fitness gurus. The first thing you have to learn about weight loss is it is not fair. There's nothing fair about it. There's what is and what isn't. And the frustration comes with trying to apply something that isn't actual for you because it is actual for someone else. In other words, oh, my neighbor follows this diet where he just, eats food that start with the letter K on Tuesdays and he lost 30 pounds. What happened to your neighbor has no bearing on what's going to happen to you. It just doesn't work that way. This is your genetic predisposition, and this is where you are in space and time as far as what your body's used to responding to. So my friend who weighed 273 pounds was doing an hour of cardio a day. His reality was losing half a pound a week. And you know what? As long as he was losing that half a pound, we would take it. And it's not fair and it's frustrating. And again, that's very unusual. I've seen both ends of the spectrum. 90% of people aren't either extreme, they fall somewhere in between. Most people, it's going to come down to having a reasonable routine, consistent behaviors, understanding what exercise and activities are most matched to their body type, and then understanding when my current nutrition strategy has highway in front of it. In other words, if I keep eating this way, my body is going to continue to progress and march towards my chosen goal, or my body has acclimated to this environment. And while I may continue to improve my health and wellness and stay fit, it's unlikely to change significantly my body composition or weight. And knowing that difference, there is an art and a science to it. You can know that difference if we're tracking, we're logging, and we're looking at your analytics. That's why the first thing I tell people to do is stop guessing, start tracking how your body's responding. So that way we can come up with recommendations that are suitable for you. So we'll come back to weight loss. I'm sure we're going to circle back there, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about the different exercise types, because that's usually the first thing people ask when they're referencing their body type. Angelo, this is my body type. I have a predisposition towards this or that. What type of exercise should I do? And I think, do we have a question on did I see something on endurance training here? Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Somebody asked about endurance running and getting to a weight that's comfortable for them. So what I'd like to do is kind of give you guys a little bit of behind the scenes on our coaches and our experts that we've consulted with, and just what we've learned over the year, our thought process behind how we put exercise into different categories. Can anybody tell me how many different styles of exercise there are out there? Anyone want to take a stab at it? How many styles of exercise are there out there? What do you think? No
I'm
wrong
gonna guess six styles.
You cheated. You went for my answer. That's a great answer. 6. There are 6 categories, but I have a secret to tell you all. There's a million different styles. 6 is not all there is. 6 is my best effort at taking a swing, at making it practical for people to say, here's my body type and here's my goal. What type of exercise should I do? Because I mean, think of all the different types of exercises. The parallel synchronous swimming. There's water polo. There's CrossFit. There's running a marathon while stopping and doing push-ups there's bar, there's Pilates, we can go on and on. My wife, she trained with the people in the Cirque du Soleil that were doing the silks. There was a guy that taught me, he used to compete in juggling, and he turned it into an exercise where you used bells, which were weights that you swing and you turn into juggling. We can go on and on. The kettlebells, the cross training, the battle ropes, it all works. There's great styles of training. But at some point along the way, I've been asked by enough clients, Angelo, what type of exercise should I be doing? That I wanted to empower them to understand basically whatever the flavor of the month was that they're participating in, they understand generally how it's going to influence their physiology. So if we were to pick 2 broad categories, we would have to say there's aerobic and there's anaerobic exercise, right? Those are terms we've heard. So anybody take a stab at it. What's aerobic exercise? What does that mean?
It will, I guess, improve your cardiovascular
That's it.
health.
Yep. We could talk about the energetic pathways and how the difference between with oxygen, without oxygen, and how the Krebs cycle, but that doesn't matter. What matters is aerobic is cardiovascular, sweating, burning calories, out of breath. What's anaerobic?
And that's like getting your body, making your body ability to, or have the ability to burn fat. Is, I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
It can have that. Anaerobic is going to be resistance work. And yes, when you build muscle, that can help speed your metabolism. It can. Lifting weights to build muscle, that's anaerobic activity. So with these 2 broad categories, if somebody's goal is to get stronger, which category you think they're going to spend most of their time in? The aerobic exercise or the anaerobic exercise?
Anaerobic.
They want to get stronger. That's it. So they're going to lift weights. They're going to do resistance training. And if somebody wants to increase their cardiovascular output, that's going to be aerobic. So now you see how we ended up getting there to those 6 categories. So now what we're going to do is break it down. And generally speaking, I'm going to say there's 3 general categories of exercise that fall under aerobic, and then 3 that fall under strength, anaerobic. Though it's not perfect. And as we go through them, you'll see that it's not always a one-to-one translation. So if we were to go to the far extreme of aerobic conditioning, what we have is endurance work. What's endurance? What are some of the attributes of endurance exercise? Or even just give me an example of one endurance exercise.
If you're running long, steady distance.
Very good. Yep. Any other exercises that would qualify? Similar.
Biking for long distances.
Very good.
But sustained, anything sustained for a longer period of time?
Exactly. Now, I'm speaking strictly now from the standpoint of its impact on our body shape, size, and metabolism, not necessarily from a performance standpoint. That would be a little different discussion. But from the standpoint on the impact it's going to have on our body size, shape, and metabolism. The attributes that make endurance training unique is actually the ingredient that it's missing. Can anybody think of what endurance training will not do? Very good. Somebody got it there. Shout it out. Don't be shy. We're just a small group here today. Won't somebody help me out? What won't it do? Someone already said it in the comments.
Build muscle.
Attaboy, Steven. Good to see you, by the way, buddy.
You too.
It won't build muscle. Now, why is that important? Guys, I cannot tell you, my heart breaks. It's the pet peeve in the industry. I had these well-intentioning ladies that would come to me and they would tell me, Angelo, I worked with this trainer and he told me that the stronger I was, the more muscle I had, the faster, the better fat burning machine. And every day I'd go in and he'd have me do these heavy squats and heavy leg press machine. And I got strong, but my thighs got bigger. I said, well, did you want to get muscle on your legs? And she said, no, I just wanted to lose weight. Well, then you did the wrong exercise. There's nothing wrong with leg press. Nothing wrong with squats. Probably my favorite exercise. But there's something wrong with it if it doesn't line up with your goals. So that's what we're looking at is our intention to increase muscular size? Now, avoid extremes. Even when I give someone a dominantly aerobic protocol to follow, I am still going to have them do some resistance training. Why? Because in order to be balanced, healthy, and fit, we have to address all of our body's physiological needs, our cardiovascular health, our metabolic health, but also our muscular health. We don't want to have a fat burning machine. We don't want to expend a lot of calories, but then, try and carry in the groceries and throw out our back because our musculature is so weak. So we need balance. But now we're getting to the meat and potatoes of decision making. I want you to think of your exercise as a pie graph. If I look back, not at your last workout, but if I look back at your last month of training and I were to draw a pie graph, how much of that time would be going into aerobic conditioning, cardiovascular conditioning? How much would go into strength training? And if you tell me my goal is to become a better runner and I want to do aerobic conditioning and I don't want to put on any muscle and I just want to do something that burns calories, I still want to see some resistance training in there, but I want to see the majority of that pie graph be comprised of endurance training or similar. Now, if you say, I really want to see my body reshape, I want to sculpt, I want to see that rear delt that defines my arms, I want to actually see abs, or hey, I want to be able to have more defined, I want an inner or outer thigh sweep, I want tighter glutes, any of those things. Is running going to be the first thing I'm going to ask you to do? What do you think?
Nope.
No. Of course not. Because aerobic exercise, it can make you smaller, but it's not going to shape your body. It's not going to add muscle to your body. It's not going to condition. It's not going to tone your body. I had a gal that I trained for years, quite the athlete, and she was a runner. But she was a runner, but a self-proclaimed fair weather runner. So what would happen is during the summer months, she would do a lot of mileage every week, and I knew her really well. So she during the summer, she weighed between 113 and 116 pounds. Do you know what she would always complain to me about? She'd say, Angelo, I have cellulite on my legs. And there's some people have a predisposition towards more of it, but she would notice it mostly in the summer. Now in the winter, it wasn't as nice out, so she did more gym workouts. Guess what she was doing? Squats and leg presses. And she would actually, during the winter, she'd usually weigh 120 to 122 pounds, so a few pounds heavier, but the cellulite would be almost gone. Why? Anybody want to take a stab? Muscles like a facelift, but for your thighs and butt, just like this. That's what happens, right? We build muscle and it pushes out against the skin. Fat doesn't do that, fat's soft. See, so anybody who takes the stance, this type of exercise is best, that type of exercise is best, doesn't understand the beautiful diversity and different exercise styles and how they can all contribute to your physique, to your body, to your health, to your fitness, to your wellness in unique but different ways. So now going back to the exercise styles, now we learned a little bit about endurance training and what it will do and what it won't do. Endurance training will not contribute significantly to toning your body in the way that building muscle will tone your body. Endurance training will burn calories in the absence of a hypertrophic effect, meaning it will not add any significant amount of muscle. In fact, with enough endurance training, your type 2 muscle fibers, or sometimes known as fast twitch muscle fibers, will give way to a more type 1 muscle fiber or slow twitch fiber dominance, which do not have the potential for size, and they're more endurance driven. So there was this great picture that came out years ago of Olympic athletes that said, guess the sport based on their body shape and size. You could always tell the endurance long distance runners from the sprinters. Sprinters were just one solid muscle. They were just rock. The endurance long distance runners looked great, very petite, didn't carry a lot of mass on their body. Now let's move to we're talking about aerobic exercise, but now we're going to move one step closer to strength training. Now we're going to talk about interval training. I'm going to read you the definition, is actually in one of our books, of endurance training. Endurance training is physical training that consists of alternating periods of high and low intensity aerobic activity. Interval training can create mild muscular hypertrophy. Short maximal effort bursts work type 2 muscle fibers, which have the potential to increase in size. While this type of training can result in some muscular soreness and hypertrophy, most people will only experience muscle sparing effects. This makes interval training a good option for people wishing to burn calories without decreasing muscularity. So, has anybody here done interval training of one sort or another? Yeah, most people have. What's it feel like? What's it do to your body? Anybody want to relate their experience with interval training?
Keeps that heart rate going longer.
That's exactly. It can send your heart rate through the roof. Let me tell you, some of the most intense workouts are interval training. Why? Because the rest periods enable you to gather, recover, and muster for another all-out push. Very effective at burning calories, very effective at bringing up that heart rate, high intensity, something called HIIT training. That stands for high intensity interval training. A lot of fitness trainers love to use HIIT or interval training for their clients to help them achieve a great level of fitness. One of the great things about interval training is it's time managed. Now, in 30 minutes or less, do you burn more calories doing interval training, HIIT training, or do you burn more calories doing endurance training? What do you think?
It,
Yes.
Yeah, burn more with HIIT.
Yes. So then why would I ever do endurance training over HIIT? And there is an answer to that. Why would I ever do endurance training over HIIT?
stamina or longevity?
Have you ever seen someone do an hour and a half HIIT training session? I'm going to answer that for you. The answer is no, you haven't. Because they can't. It's impossible. You did an hour and a half HIIT training, you have to take them to the hospital if HIIT's done right. HIIT interval training is about maximal effort. Now, for beginners, it's just varied intensity. That's a little different. But I'm talking about, from an athletic standpoint, maximal effort. Wind sprints. Line up. I'd have my high school athletes line up on the line and 40-yard dash, go. And then they would get 60 seconds to recover, and then they would go again. You think we could do that for an hour and a half? No chance. So like somebody mentioned, you're exactly right. It conditions an entirely different pathway. So when you're doing interval training, your body's using its most potent fuel source, your sugars, your immediate glycogen stores, to fuel that energy in the Krebs cycle and how we replenish ATP. And we don't need to get into all those boring details, but basically you use your potent fuel source. With endurance training, your body's tapping into its reserves because it's doing so gradually over time. So if somebody is healthy, fit, and says to me, Angelo, I want to burn the maximal amount of calories, but I only have 20 minutes, I'm usually going to have them do interval training. And if they say to me, I want to burn the maximal amount of calories and I have as much time as you need, I'm usually going to have them do endurance training. But endurance training doesn't truly become endurance training until you're doing it long enough to have an adaptive response. That adaptive response for people who are conditioned can push you into hours of training, not minutes. And so it's a commitment. You can't cheat it. It's what I love about powerlifting. I could train for powerlifting on the weekends and cheat it with just a few minutes here or there for maximal strength. For endurance sports, there's no shortcuts. You actually have to have the time to invest into it. And you can burn more total calories with endurance sports. Why? Because you can actually participate at a greater volume. Interval training. Will it build muscle? What do you think? Someone said it.
A small amount, not a lot.
Yeah, that's it. So for the fitness nerds, we would use terminology like it's muscle sparing. In other words, if you're doing any aerobic activity, but for an all-out push, likely you are engaging your muscular system enough to have some level of conditioning. Now, sprinters, they don't get bulky. You're not going to think they're a bodybuilder, but they are solid. So yes, it can put some on, but mostly it's going to burn calories. It's not going to have a similar effect to if somebody was in the gym actually lifting weights, doing push-ups, doing squats. Different. So we start to see lots of exercise can fall under the category of interval training, and how maybe based on our goal and body type, we would select interval training as part of that pie graph. Now, the next category is called cardio circuits. I made that up. That's not a real thing. It's just a descriptive terminology. We had to come up with something. Me and the other coaches, we sat down, we talked about it. What's a descriptive term? Because we didn't want people to confuse it with circuit training at the gym, which is very common. But we wanted something to describe any level of kind of that home boot camp style of exercise. Any level of kind of that almost like military type style training where you're doing mostly the body weight and you're doing some aerobic activity and you're doing squats and jumps and push-ups or jump rope or jumping jacks or any of that stuff. That's an entire, there's so many different workout modalities out there that fall into that bucket. We needed a name for it for someone to go, okay, this is still, if I had to draw a line and say either you're on the strength side or the cardio side, it's still on the cardio side of that line, but just barely. Because you are doing some strength and plyometrics and conditioning movements. So now we can start to see the logic and why we might want to define that. Maybe that would be a good selection for someone who is interested in actually sculpting, toning, hardening their body, maybe even adding a little bit of muscle in certain areas, but their dominant goal is, I just want to be a smaller person, or I just want to burn fat. I want to be in the cardiovascular pathway. So see, that has a legitimate role, a whole category. Now we move over to circuit training. What's circuit training? What do you think of circuit training?
Curves.
That's exactly what I think of, Stacy. In fact, that was how I got into this industry all those millennia ago, it feels like. I was a window washer, and I was doing the windows on the outside of a curves. And a very sweet lady came out and said, hey, you know, I've been wanting to do a little more weightlifting. I was wondering, you know anyone that could help train and teach me how to lift weights? Because I was into weightlifting at that time, and we struck up a conversation. But it was on a curves. Curves was a great model. You do a station and you do some resistance training, and then you rest and you move on to the next station and do some more machine or resistance training. Great model. And it is aerobic also. Why? Because it uses one of the 4 methods of increasing intensity when you're doing strength training. There's 4 ways to increase intensity when we do strength training. Can anybody name one of the 4? How do you make strength training harder or more intense?
Heavier, make it heavier, the weight.
Lift a bigger weight. Exactly, Teresa. That's it. Lift a bigger weight. That's the first way. Can anyone think of another way?
Higher reps.
Lift that big weight more times. That's it. That's number 2. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, now the next 2 are harder.
Speed slower.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's tied in with number 4. Yes. Uh-huh.
What do they call it? Like a reverse set?
Yeah. Yep. That's tied in with number 3. I'll give you a hint. You know how everybody says they've just discovered the best ab exercise, and they say, this ab exercise I feel more than any other ab exercise, and yet everyone says that about a different ab exercise. Has anybody heard that before? Anybody noticed that? Let me teach you why. The best ab exercise is the one you're not used to. Same principle as why you can do squats in the gym and be just fine. Then you go ride a horse and you're crippled for 2 days because it's what you're not used to. So you can lift a heavier weight. You can lift that heavy weight for more repetitions, or you can do an exercise in a greater range of motion or a different range of motion than your body is accustomed to, thus eliciting a new adaptive response. That's the 3rd way of challenging your body. The 4th way, however, is my favorite, and incidentally, the method that Curves employs. Increase your rest time. Great job. You just lifted a heavy weight more times in new ranges of motion. Now go do it again before resting. That increases intensity really fast. So that's what circuit training does, is you take traditional resistance training that's been around forever. It can be classic bodybuilding strength moves. It can be the Cybex machine at the gym. It can be push-ups at home. but now you string those movements together with a diminished amount of recovery in between to elicit a more intense result. What's great about that? Two birds with one stone. You get to have a strength response, an adaptive response. It's hypertrophic, but because you're not giving your body rest, you're getting cardiovascular benefits at the same time, which makes it a very efficient style of training. So you see when I said it's not perfect, there is no perfect category that's just this, because circuit training is a little bit aerobic, but if I had to be forced to put it on one side of the line or the other, I'd have to say this is a conditioning strength exercise modality. Then we move one more layer deep and we come to cross training. Cross training, again, imperfect, because cross training can include straight up cardiovascular, even endurance elements. But why do you suppose we have to put cross training in the hypertrophic or strength category, strength side of that line? What do you guys think?
Because it involves actual lifting weights, maybe?
That's it. Yeah. So no matter how much of an aerobic element may be present, if you're also doing deadlifts, it's going to be hypertrophic. It's going to put muscle size on you. Great philosophy. So when done safely, we know that's an issue. Like any exercise, it's just cross training is a really good one because now you have a time element. Because when we think cross training, what's the most famous cross training style today?
CrossFit.
Yeah, that's it. It's everywhere. And so, and I met Greg Glassman, and I've talked with a lot of the top 10 CrossFitters that I've had the privilege of working with and training over the years, and their coaches. And it's an ongoing challenge because it is also a sport. It was actually a brilliant idea. Here's what CrossFit is. It's the gamification of exercise, which is brilliant because it pushes people to go to that next level that they might not go to without that gamification element. It's a great style of training, but with that push comes increased risk, so you have to be careful. But it's absolutely doing the same thing as circuit training. It's basically putting a time element challenge on your exercise. So you burn both calories, it's aerobic, and you tend to build muscle. It's just kind of at a little bit more aggressive degree. And then finally, if we go all the way to the most extreme opposite side, the absolute opposite of endurance training is going to be bodybuilding, powerlifting, weightlifting. Your classic 3 sets of 10 to build muscle, to hypertrophy muscles. I want to dispel a myth. Well, I want my muscles to get bigger, but only a little bigger. So instead of doing the exercise that caused my muscles to grow, I'm going to do more of exercise that caused my muscles to grow less. That is incorrect thinking, inefficient rather thinking. That's like saying, I don't want to drive 90 miles an hour. I want to only go to speed limit 60. So I'm going to accelerate slower. Get there faster with the most efficient modality possible, and then stop. Put it in maintenance. Classic example. So I help folks a lot of times who are wanting to, okay, I'm an ectomorphic body type, where I have a predisposition to burning fat and staying slender a little bit easier, but boy, I just can't keep shape on my arms. I want to be able to see definition in my arms, but I don't want to get bulky. So I run for exercise. Run for exercise. Then go to the gym and do 3 sets of 10 shoulder presses, and it'll be the best of both worlds, because I don't care how much you run, you're not going to get that nice rear delt cap. And it's okay to do both. And oh, by the way, it is okay to compartmentalize. Become this marketing taboo word. Functional training was all the all the rave back in the day, and this was the new, oh, it has to be functional. You want multi-joint big ticket items that emulate real movements in life. So bicep curls are no good. You want to do squats and deadlifts and cleans and things that you need in real life. And that's great. I love all that. You know what I have some of my top 10 CrossFit athletes doing? Bicep curls and tricep extensions. Because it's a better exercise? No. But because it serves a purpose of getting in a specific muscle group to hypertrophy, or a specific muscle group that isn't getting strengthened to the degree that it could be because other muscle groups are failing first. Classic example is triceps. I have a lot of my strength athletes working triceps because they're so used to doing big ticket multi-joint exercises that are failing because their shoulders, pecs, or back is giving out first. Their triceps are never fully seeing their true potential. And you know why I have some people work just hamstrings or just glutes? Because they just want their hamstrings or glutes to develop without getting bigger thighs. Or they just want their shoulders to develop without getting bigger triceps. And there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with it is when you're skipping entire muscle groups that are now atrophying and creating a risk of injury, or you're training muscle groups to a degree that you have a muscular imbalance. That's generally not what's going on. So it's okay to mix and match. So now circling back to body types. You look at your body type and say, you know, I have a lot of muscle on me, but I've been told that muscle speeds your metabolism. So what I should be doing is mostly lifting weights in the gym to build bigger muscles. But what I really need to do, according to the doctor, is be a smaller person. We're probably doing it wrong. Now, that doesn't mean don't go to the gym and don't lift weights. I still want you doing that because I still want you to be strong. But what I want to see is that pie chart when we look back, and I go, if you draw a pie chart for the last 30 days, I want to see a wedge no bigger than 25, 30% being the time you spent lifting heavy weights in the gym. And I want to see the endurance training, the aerobic training, the HIIT training. And sometimes you need to just change it up for variety. Sometimes the best exercise is simply the thing that will get you consistent and at the gym. Otherwise, we'll miss workouts. It's okay to have variety, but I want to see the dominant making sense for your body type. I got to eat protein because protein is so I don't lose muscle. Are you worried about losing muscle? If you are, eat protein. If you're not worried about losing muscle, maybe you don't need gobs and gobs of additional protein shakes beyond hitting your basic needs. So that's where I encourage my clients to be thoughtful about. Now, what about that ectomorphic body type? Yeah, I don't really have a problem with weight, but I still have a little bit of a gut. And, I have a little body fat, mostly in my stomach, and I want some more muscle, but I really want to see the stomach go away. Well, what I do every day, I get up in the morning and I don't eat anything, and I get on my treadmill and do fasting state cardio. Think of the cartoon characters where they just a stick figure with two tight, skinny arms, skinny legs, but then a gut. Well, that guy's getting on the treadmill every day and he's going to lose weight. His arms and his legs are going to amazingly get skinnier still. And he's still going to have a gut, just a little bit smaller. What we need that guy to do is we need that guy to get up and first of all, eat. So that way the muscle sticks to him. And then after he eats, then he needs to go and he needs to work those arms and those legs and build that muscle. And the calorie expenditure is going to go towards that. And then I don't want to see a pie graph that comes back that has all weight training and no cardiovascular health. And then he ends up having a heart attack 5 years later because his heart isn't healthy. That's no good either, right? We need balance. But I want that pie graph to look very different for him. See, that guy, I want his pie graph to be mostly strength training, mostly resistance training, and a little bit of cardio for balance. and then everyone in between. See, at MetPro, we try and learn new things. Every year, I tell my coaches, I want to learn what we were doing wrong. I'll give you an example of something we were doing wrong. For years, we told people that endomorphs tended to lose the least amount of weight, had the hardest time losing weight, because endomorphs tend to be the stockier of the group. And we were wrong. After some years of data and actually going back through our data, what we learned was that actually mesomorphs tend to lose, or more accurately, change weight the least. Why is that? Because endomorphs typically have more weight, not always, typically have more weight to lose. Mesomorphs typically have more composition shifts to be had. So you see how that helps with our motivation if we understand our body type in relation to our goals and set our expectations around that? Knowing, hey, if I'm a mesomorph body type, I had a mesomorph once I trained. He was 5'6". He weighed 190 pounds. We worked out together for 9 months. 9 months later, and he came to me for weight loss. 9 months later, he weighed 188 pounds. We lost a grand total of 2 pounds in 9 months. That doesn't sound so good, right? He dropped 6 pant sizes. You wouldn't recognize the guy. Just complete. He took it from here and he moved it up here. Just a completely different guy. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then we have people who will come to me and say, well, Angelo, I know I need to lose 120, 150 pounds, but I really feel like my body composition is shifting. Bob, I need to see the scale going down. We got to get the weight off. So we have to be realistic with ourselves as well. So that's my tirade for the day, Tom. I know I went left, I went right, but if anybody has more specific questions about body types and what it means for exercise selection, and then maybe another time we can do a specific body type on nutrition, email them over, text them over, send them to us.
Yeah, for those of you that did ask questions and we didn't get to those, I'm going to make sure that those get answered. So we'll respond following this. And thanks for raising those questions. They were really good. Thank you, Angelo. That was covered a lot of great ground. I'm glad to hear all that. So I really do appreciate that.
Thanks for coming, all.
Thanks, everybody.